What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Stochastic channel. Today, we're talking college football DFS ahead of the Week 11 Wednesday night action slate. Before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. We're also brought to you by Prize Picks. They have a first match deposit bonus up to $100 when you click the link in the video description below. Must be a new user. They're also offering you a free month of Odd Shopper, which has all sorts of sports betting tools, sides, totals, player props that'll help you with everything Prize Picks has to offer. Link in the video description below. All right, we start a 3-game action slate, kicking things off with a real banger. Akron, Miami, Ohio. 18-point spread. Spreads and totals are as of Tuesday evening. Likely going to see a little movement here, but pretty updated. Akron, 67th or 76th in pace. 57% pass rate. They're constantly losing games, but got a win last week over Kent State, so good job, Akron. At the quarterback position, Jeff Undercuffler has been playing most of the snaps lately. This is unbelievable to say, but he takes so many sacks that he's almost unplayable in DFS. Even with a 57% pass rate, the guy has 129 rushing yards this year, and he's barely played. Some of it's not his fault. They're playing behind a terrible offensive line, and he just can't run. But, I mean, this is like a Jalen Jones situation from Marshall earlier this year. If you guys remember, I think it was a single game slate, but he finished with negative points because he took so many sacks. That's in play with Undercuffler every single time he's on the field. So and then you mix in the potential for Taj Bullock to take some snaps here and there. He's just utterly unplayable. Like, I would rather play, I don't know, like a timeshare running back in Superflex than just take a stab at Undercuffler, especially in this matchup. The backfield, Lorenzo Lingard just absolutely iced Drake Anderson in their last game. A lot of you bet the Lorenzo Lingard rushing prop. My God, I can't speak this morning. A lot of you bet the Lorenzo Lingard over in his rushing prop, and it took him 22 carries to grind his way there against Kent State. Opportunity appears to be pretty good for Lingard, but efficiency probably won't be there. Miami, Ohio only allows 3.6 yards per carry to opposing backs. What does this look like in negative game script? Because they were playing Kent State, a game that was neutral for most of the game. If it's negative, do we still see 22 opportunities? I have a lot of questions with him at this price. Would rather get to other players. In the receiving game, we basically have Daniel George and Josiah Gathings. Alex Adams didn't play a lot in their last game. I don't know if he's dealing with an injury or something. You're not going to see much reporting on these MAC schools, and I think it's all speculation. His routes over the last 3 games were at 76%, 53%, and then 20%. So you can see a pretty stark drop-off, whereas Gathings and George were still up above 90% apiece. The drop didn't really lead to a lot of routes for anyone individually. They still rotate tight ends, Jake Newell, TJ Banks. I think Banks is by far your safer option. But yeah, I mean, it was pretty disgusting beyond these two, so I don't think there's anything to really take home. I'm just playing George and Gathings. On the Miami, Ohio side, Brett Gabbert out for the year, so Avion Smith now leads the Miami, Ohio offense that ranks 129th in pace, passing 43% of the time. That has dropped substantially since Gabbert went down. Expect this to be a run-heavy team. Avion Smith had 16 designed carries in their last contest. He's essentially like a better version of Kyle Kelly for Ball State. And since these two teams have made changes offensively, we've seen drastic shifts in their pass rates. So I would expect this to be a run-heavy approach for Miami, Ohio, and Avion Smith the rest of the way. Those 16 designed attempts give him an excellent floor. They've also narrowed the backfield. Rashad Amos, 21 carries. Again, you have the same thing as Lorenzo Lingard. What happens in negative game script, especially because he's not the pass-catching back, Kevin Davis is. Even Kenny Tracy operates more in the pass game than Rashad Amos. So there is some risk, but I mean, in a game where you're 18-point favorites, how much risk is there really? I think you could play him pretty confidently. Prefer him over Lingard straight up. Receiving game, Gage Larvadane. Man, it's tough to see him kind of wilt away on this Miami, Ohio team now that they've sort of shifted offensive philosophies. First game without Gabbert, 4 targets. The 2 prior, he'd been double digits. think you could argue he's a little expensive on this slate. I would certainly prefer an Akron receiver volume-wise, but he's the most talented player. Joe Wilkins is number 2 for me, Notre Dame transfer. This Miami, Ohio team has great receivers, so it's kind of unfortunate that Gabbert got hurt and Avion Smith can't throw, but I think you could throw them both into tournament lineups specifically. Their routes are very consistent. Beyond that, Miles Marshall, his routes have been all over the place, dropped below 44%. They use multiple tight ends. It's tough to play anyone beyond the top 2, in my opinion. Javon Tracy's right in that conversation with Marshall. They're basically the 2 that split that wide receiver 3 spot. I would prefer to just get Wilkins or Larvadain. Before we move on, I want to tell you about our data package you're seeing on the screen. If you want access to this, you can click the link in the video description below. This will give you access to our data usage sheet, which you're seeing right now, all sorts of opportunity metrics, and you will have player projections and ownership projections. So make sure to check that out. Link below. It's all powered by me. Second game is Bowling Green, Kent State. 9-point spread in favor of Bowling Green, 41 total. So we've only got low totals this game, but on the Bowling Green side, Connor Basilick and Camden Orth splitting reps. They've mostly been Connor Basilick of late, but this could change at any point in time. It is not secure. Avion Smith is by far a better signal caller than either of these players. It's not quite the undercuffler territory. Like, I might throw a dart on Orth or Basilick, depending on who starts. That'll be late news. I'm personally expecting Basilick, but don't love either of these guys. Bowling Green is 131st in pace with a 43.5% pass rate. They do not like passing the ball. Biggest late news on the slate is Terrion Stewart, who left Bowling Green's last game. 7K, but the volume is awesome for him, averaging 14.1 touches per game, which has risen drastically in their last 3, where he has 25 carries, 21 carries, and then 15 carries before exiting with an injury. He is not the pass game back. That is Teron Keith. If Terrion Stewart misses this game, Teron Keith could be set up just for a monstrous workload. He already is the team's second most targeted player, and he's 3rd on the team in receiving yards. If you add in some extra carries for Teron Keith, he would be awesome. I think we also probably see Jason Patterson and Payshawn Wimberly factor into that backfield. The most likely scenario here, I think, is that Terrion Stewart plays, maybe in slightly diminished capacity, but ultimately this will come down to late news. I think Teron Keith would be the biggest beneficiary, with Patterson and Wimberly being change of pace options. Receiving game, Bowling Green doesn't throw the ball a ton at this point, and targets have been volatile for them. For reference, Harold Fannin had 7 targets. That was what he had sustained in his 3 prior games combined. So that's very tough to back here, but I think just as far as routes go, here's who's going to be on the field. Odiu Hilaire, 79% of the routes. He's been above 90 numerous times. Abdul Fatai Ibrahim, 93% of the routes. He's been above 90% in every game since week 2. So this guy's just as far as routes go, he's a monster. I wouldn't call him that target-wise. Austin Osborne's the 3, but his routes bounce all over the place. Last 3 games, 56%, 72, 59. And then tight end Harold Fannin, he saw a career high, or I guess I should say a season high in routes of 76%, excluding week 2. That was the only game where he was higher. So pretty good for Fannin. But they will use Gazalek, tight end, Levi, I don't know how to say your name, Andrew Bench. These guys are involved. Jalen Embry's a situational wide receiver 3. To rank them, I still prefer Hilaire, number 1. I think just more times than not, he's going to lead the team in targets. Number 2 for me is Ibrahim. 3, I would say Osborne, and 4 would be Fannin. His price has just come up to a point where it's pretty shocking that he's the most expensive receiver on this slate, whereas he's 5th in targets. So I'll just sell high rather than try to buy when this is the highest it's ever been all year. On Kent State, Michael Olamo allegedly was unavailable last game. Again, don't expect a lot of good reporting from Kent State, but Tommy Ulikowski started the game, played really bad as a passer, but he does run. He has 123 cumulative rushing yards this year. So that at least puts him in the conversation for DFS. His price is definitely not good. But Kent State, 72nd in pace, 43.5% pass rate. If Ulikowski starts, I definitely will play some. Not much else to say. It's basically just because he can run. In the backfield, Gavin Garcia returned, playing change of pace role. It's kind of like a 65-35 split Jalen Thomas's direction with Gavin Garcia being that change of pace. But I wonder if this changes at some point. Gavin Garcia has more rushing yards than Jalen Thomas. He's just more efficient. So it's tough for me to break down this backfield. I think both are worth darts, but this is a game where they're nearly double-digit underdogs again. Neither is particularly involved in the pass game. Jalen Thomas has 4 targets all year, which leads running back. So these are not good plays, just GPP darts. Unfortunately, Krishan McCray went down for Kent State, their only good player. What that means is it probably solidifies our 3 receivers, Jameel Gardner, Luke Flourier, and Trell Harris. I don't think there's really anything that separates these guys. None of them are good. They're just cheap volume plays in an offense that should be passing a decent amount. Gardner, 100% of the routes. Flourier, 100% of the routes. Trell Harris, he basically just jumped on the field right when McCray went down. The two combined for 100% of routes, but Trell Harris, 28, McCray, 72. Expecting Harris to do most of that. And then tight end is Justin Holmes, mostly. Hayden Junker fills out what's left of that. Last game, Eastern Michigan, Toledo. 19-point spread in favor of Toledo. This game has a 46 total, which is the best on the board. Eastern Michigan, 97 that pace with a 49% pass rate. They've been rotating quarterbacks. Austin Smith and Ike Udengwu have been splitting time. And even Cameron McCoy has played a little bit of late. They use him sometimes as a situational rusher, but I don't know what's going to happen or how many snaps these guys are going to get. None of them have been good. So stay away spot for me. As you can see, the 2 quarterbacks I'm most interested in are Avion Smith and DeQuan Finn. I think those are your cash guys. And then you could maybe use like an Ulikowski or something for tournaments. The backfield, Samson Evans leads a committee, which is also comprised of Jalen Jackson. This is kind of like a 60-40 split, 65-35 split as well. Very tough matchup for both backs. Not too interested. The receivers I am interested in because I know they're talented players from previous renditions of this offense with different quarterbacks. And the volume is going to be pretty decent. So Tanner New averages 7.6 targets per game, only 46 yards. He's a very good price-adjusted play. JB Mitchell, I think he's in this conversation too. I would put him a peg below Tanner New in terms of talent, but the routes are pretty good for him. He's up above 90% routinely. The wide receiver 3 is Hamzi El Zayat. He had an 81% route share last game. Very easy to target him. And then from there, tight end, they will rotate. It's Blake Daniels, Gier, Getzinger. Even like Andreas Posky and Max Reese play a little bit, so not playing a tight end. But those first 3 receivers are completely fine. Only last thing to say that I forgot from earlier, the backfield, Jalen Jackson's their preferred pass-catching back. His route rate was above 70% last game, whereas Samson Evans is at 25-ish% game in, game out. So Samson Evans kind of lacks a pass game floor that maybe you'd want from a lead back. Toledo, you definitely need to play Toledo. 66 in pace, 38% pass rate. Question is how many. I think you could easily get to 4 of them in cash games. DeQuan Finn let people down last game just because he didn't run a ton. But on the year, 489 rushing yards, averages 178 through the air. There's just no safety with really any other quarterback other than Avion Smith. So even if you're worried about that, and in certain games, they'll probably just limit him and neuter the offense, which is likely here. I mean, still, what are we going to do? Like, play Undercuffler, play Basilic, play Ulikowski, maybe him, play Austin Smith. I mean, you could play 4 RBs. That's another avenue. But, I mean, the quarterbacks are so bad, I don't see a way around DeQuan Finn. In the backfield, don't read too much into the current split. Jock Stewart, Penny Boone, they slaughtered the last team they played, Buffalo. Penny Boone will lead this backfield most of the time, but Stewart is involved. I think you can play either of these backs, play them together if you want. I like Penny Boone. I think he's a priority and worth paying up for. He's averaging 108 yards per game. Eastern Michigan allows 4.8 yards per carry. I'll be making Boone and DeQuan Finn a priority, especially with the cheap receivers. Like an Avion Smith, DeQuan Finn, Penny Boone start is not hard to do. In the receiving game, the volume is not good for these players, so you're kind of reliant on a big play. Like Jerwan Newton is just flat out way too expensive on this slate. When you're prioritizing like Avion Smith, DeQuan Finn, Penny Boone, and Jerwan Newton, I definitely prefer the runners over Jerwan Newton. So he'll probably be a fade for me. Junior Vander Ross, he's a little more viable just based on price. He actually has only seen 4 fewer targets than Jerwan Newton, so that should immediately pique your interest. Just cheaper volume. in another explosive offense. Beyond that, we have Larry Stevens. His route rate hovers like at 45%. Jaden Dotton kind of got benched. Devin Maddox, he had been really low in terms of routes, like 30%, but then he jumped up to 52% last game, kind of at the expense of Jaden Dotton. And he actually was slightly ahead of Larry Stevens, which was surprising to see. I think if you want to throw a dart on Maddox, he's kind of working his way back into the rotation, and he's really cheap. Otherwise, tight end Anthony Torres plays a ton, 71% of the routes last game. He's been above 70% in 3 straight. So Torres also in play, I think, as a cheap option. I'll be looking to mainly run Maddox and Torres, and as well as some Stevens and Van Der Ross, primarily as the Toledo receivers. That'll do it for the slate today. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. If you have a question, reach out on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski. We'll be back again tomorrow breaking down more college football DFS. But until then, good luck, everybody. We'll see you next time.